Calling the regular meeting to order. A recording and or broadcast of this meeting is being made at the direction of the board, and the recording and or broadcast may capture images and sounds of those attending the meeting. This is Jessica Spicer. I am running the meeting because our board president, Steve, is remote. So that's why I'm here. I'm going to call roll now. Vladimir?
Here.
Brian?
Here.
Shally?
Here. Did you hear me?
I can. Oh, I can hear Steve though.
Can you hear me, Jessica? No?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I cannot hear Steve, but I see Steve.
Yes, you're.
Okay. All right. And I'm here. Let's get up to do the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any board members who'd like to provide comment on the agenda? No? Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Hi.
Anybody opposed? I say aye.
Do we have to do a roll call vote? Because we have remote members?
No.
Okay.
The motion passes 5-0. Closed session report. There is nothing to report from closed session. Mr. Bear, superintendent's update.
Yeah, mine are contained in a couple presentations, so we can move forward.
All right. On to the consent calendar. Any board members like to comment on the consent calendar? Can I get a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Hi.
And anybody want it? We already did. Okay. Aye, and motion passes 5-0.
Did we hear Steve?
I did hear Steve.
Okay. Sorry.
It's all good. I've heard him. And employee request to address the board. Kate?
Hi, good evening. It's nice to see all of you. First, LATA is thrilled that the housing project on Grant Ave was approved at last Tuesday's Board of Supervisors meeting. We're looking forward to having more accessible and affordable local housing available to our teachers and are eager to see this project progress. Our members are also continuing to be appreciative of their access to pool testing through LASD. In the last 2 weeks, I've heard from many individuals that the ability to be tested on site is convenient and brings peace of mind as we continue to navigate these times. Finally, our teachers participated in a virtual professional development day last Tuesday, split between professional courses and self-directed time. Members not only appreciated the learning sessions, which were well developed and meaningful for teachers, but also greatly appreciated the self-directed time where they could plan, work in their classrooms, or focus on self-care. This time was rejuvenating for many of our members, and it provided a much needed opportunity to reset and rebalance. Thank you and have a nice evening.
Thank you, Kate. All right. Next up, we have our community comments. To provide community comment on an agenda item, members of the public should use the raise hand button if using the Zoom app, or press *9 if using your phone. Your name will be announced when it is your turn to speak. Prior to providing your comment, please be sure your microphone is on. Requests received after public comment begins will not be accepted. Do we have anybody who wants to speak on a non-agendized item? Time is reserved for members of the public and employees to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. The board is not permitted to discuss or take action on non-agenda items, except to instruct the superintendent to review the matter further, report back to the board at a subsequent meeting, or place the matter on a future agenda. The board may make a brief comment or ask clarifying questions. Anybody have anything for public community comments? Not seeing anyone raise their hand. Let's move on to action discussion items. COVID-19 update.
Yes. Wanted to share with the board some updates around our protocols and practices as we are working through the pandemic. I think it's something we appreciate being able to share with you each board meeting, understanding the progress we're making and success we're having students and staff back in school. So this is a chart you are used to seeing. You can see the real spike in cases that has happened in Santa Clara County. We definitely appear to be on the downside of that surge. County Public Health Department has mentioned that as well, and the numbers over the past week or so have really started to come down. Still at a just over 4,000 case 7-day rolling average. Moving forward, this is the last 4 weeks in LASD. These are the number of positive cases we've had. Staff and students are consolidated in each of those numbers. I will point out that first column accounts for 2 weeks. Each of the other columns account for 1 week. That first column is also when we were not in school. That was over the holiday break. Until January 1. So you can see that the week of January 9 to 15 is when we really hit what I would say is our surge as a school district, with the higher case counts working their way up. Last week, overall, you can see that there were a couple places that there were increases in cases. Generally, case counts are coming down in our schools. So that's where we stand today. Still pool testing each week and response testing associated with that. So we are doing a great job tracking cases and really identifying and making sure, making sure we isolate the positive cases that we find. I just have to say, our team is doing an incredible job with this. Our 2 district nurses, Monica Sidher and Mary Fitzgerald, really lead the charge on this, and they are working tirelessly at this. Our principals as well, running point at our schools, are doing a great job also. And we have brought in some new processes that will ease that, streamline and ease that load a bit. And we've already begun seeing that along with other liquids. Not sure what's up with the slides here, they're cutting off. But wanted to update you, we've been hosting vaccination clinics over the past few weeks, and just bringing you some data so you can understand the number of vaccinations that have been happening at our campuses. Thanks, Mercy. So at Santa Rita and Almond, if you recall, we were working with Santa Clara Valley Medical Center to provide 2 clinics at each of those sites. The first one at each Almond and Santa Rita happened before the holiday break, and then there was a second clinic after. You can see at Santa Rita, we administered, or Santa Clara Valley Med administered 359 vaccines. At Almond, it shot up to 477. If you recall, the day before the second clinic at Almond is the day that the booster was approved for 12 to 15-year-olds. So that really had an impact on that second clinic at Almond. The next week, we had a clinic at Block, which was 2 weeks ago. That one was in partnership with Safeway and Albertsons, and you can see the doses there. They've administered 232 COVID vaccines. Again, a large percentage of those were booster doses. And we have one again next week. Our kind of companion to the January 6th event that's going to take place on next Thursday from 3 to 7. And it is, they're really administering anything. It could be a first, a second, a booster. And they're doing flu shots as well at these particular clinics. We had a terrific turnout of volunteers for that. Jessica, I know you were there. I was there as well. But great turnout of volunteers. Really, parents in our community helping to shepherd and organize the people as they came in. So it went very, very smoothly. They were great. Both of these partners have really been fantastic in the lead up and then on the day of the event as well. All right. Want to highlight a couple of changes that are coming, and these actually appear on the next agenda item, which is the update to our COVID-19 safety plan. So one of the big changes you'll see in there is we've put in place the mechanisms necessary to move to a 5-day isolation from a 10-day isolation. This is for positive vaccinated individuals. Once they test negative on or after the 5th day, they can return the following day, provided they have no symptoms, no fever. They have to be fever-free for 24 hours without medication. We're ready to implement that. We are going to send notice out to our staff tonight because this affects both staff and students. And then we'll send this out to our parents tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. At 9 a.m. we're set to send this out, and we'll be ready to then implement that for Wednesday. So this proof of this, the big change in the, well, a couple big changes, but one of the other big changes is that this proof of negative test can be with an antigen test, and it could be an at-home test where they just parents just need to send in proof, or employee just need to send in proof of that test, and we're set up with a single point of contact for reading those and approving those. Again, you'll see that included in the COVID safety plan. It's attached to the next section. One of the other things we want to make sure we include is our overnight field trip policy and inclusion of some language around that. We are requiring students and staff to be fully vaccinated to attend overnight trips. This is really because of the sleeping arrangements where everyone is unmasked in the sleeping arrangements, usually in tighter quarters, and really we're focused on decreasing that risk of spread. And as it says in the last bullet, we are looking to formally add that to the COVID Safe Schools plan. This would affect trips such as our Walden West trips, Disneyland trip for the junior high school, the Yosemite trip, the junior high, and the others. Some schools go to Pigeon Point, but any of those overnight trips. And that is it for tonight. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Jeff? Wagner?
What does fully vaccinated mean that you have to have had a booster as well, or is it just 2 shots?
Currently, it's 2 shots. We are moving to that. There's a grace period, but we are moving to the 3rd shot being fully vaccinated.
Anybody else? Brian?
Yeah, I saw a high school parent. I got an email from the high school district, I think last week, saying that they'd gotten a large number of masks, I think KN95 masks from the state, presumably for distribution. I don't know if we have access to that.
Brandon, you want to talk about that?
So they got N95 now.
Or N95 masks?
Yeah, and most of our folks do not like the N95 masks. They're very uncomfortable. They're very happy with the KN95s. So we have ordered a bunch of KN95s. that are interested.
Right, but so the high school ones only, they're only providing them to the the staff? I wasn't sure, it was such a large number. I was wondering if they were providing it for the students as well.
I don't know what they're doing.
Okay.
Right? But, yeah,
I was just wondering because the guidance is starting to has shifted a little bit, right? That to officially say what everybody has known for a year, which is that KN95 masks are better than cloth masks. So
Yeah.
I was wondering whether we have access to purchasing such that we could provide
yeah,
to
we've got-
families who wanted that might not be able to afford or would just more
Yeah, we
immediately have
actually
access.
many KN95s for that purpose.
So we have ordered and have on hand and have begun distributing child size K95 masks.
Great.
And they would get that from the principal, from the teacher.
We will talk about that tomorrow at our principals meeting, but they have begun hitting the classrooms because I just had them shown to me at our LATA rep council meeting. A couple of teachers showed that they have these and are able to get them out to students. that
Great.
don't have them.
Because I think that will help
Yeah.
increase the safety margin if we can get students to wear KN95s instead of floppy cloth.
Steve, you have any clarifying questions?
I do. What we're hearing in the news a lot is teacher absences creating issues and struggles. How are we doing there? You combined in the report you showed of COVID positive cases that you combine the numbers of staff and students. Are we managing okay? Is my question.
I would say at that 2 weeks ago, the time of the surge, we were running very tight. Sandra was out in the classroom subbing, I was the principal subbing. That has certainly stabilized at the end of last week and then this week as well. Well, where we are, we're doing pretty well now.
Thanks.
Shelley,
Thanks, Jessica. I had a question about the vaccine clinics and the number of vaccine shots given. Is the demand greater or less than what you expected, Jeff? And if it's more than what you expected, are we planning additional vaccine clinics?
So I would say that the day after the approval at Almond, right, which was maybe the second Thursday in January, that demand was higher than expected that particular day, right? It was the day after the approval. They actually didn't run out of vaccine at that clinic, but they ran out of time to get the shots in the arms. So they did have to turn people away. By the time the block clinic came, maybe a week and a half ago, there was a steady flow, but it wasn't more than could be handled. And now parents, so there was a crossover period too, where parents who were trying to register for that there wasn't an option to select the booster shot on the drop down.
for that.
Now there is, and I just got a message today that the number of registrants is under 100 right now for that. So long-windedly, I'd say that our capacity is in excess of demand right now. I mean, our parents are being very proactive in getting the boosters, right? And our staff is very proactive as well in getting boosted.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, or just want to make sure, clarify as it relates to boosters and fully vaccinated. Boosters are only towards 12 and up.
Correct.
Because our 5 to 11-year-olds just got the ability to get vaccinated in the first place. I don't have any other questions. And you, on this one, you don't need any direction from us other
Nope.
than the next, for the next one.
You do
Oh,
have-
yeah, okay, sorry. We do have, now is the time for public comment on this agenda item. Put your hands up. It looks like we have Lori Sue. You have 3 minutes. Lori, you can talk.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Good evening, school board. I just want to share something. I don't know if you guys are aware that last November, San Diego Court, Superior Court, they just ordered that the quarantine and testing and isolation, they're only recommendations. Are you guys aware of this? Because according to your guidance right now, is not what the order says. So the quarantine that you're putting to 5 days is not according to the CDPH protocols that they're doing. That is only recommendations. How are you guys based on, how are you taking decisions based on this new court order that was filed on November 2021? Thank you.
Any other? Ready for public comment, comment on this agenda item? No. You guys want to discuss anything more to discuss as it relates to this agenda item?
I have one other question.
Yeah.
For Jeff. I guess I'll just say, I don't think I understood that comment. Feel free to send us email if you would like, because I don't think any of us up here knew exactly what you were talking about. One last question for Jeff was whether we've seen sort of attendance patterns sort of stabilize, if we're seeing sort of now more or less normal as rates of student absenteeism.
Yeah, I have not looked this way. Have you looked this week by chance? We're running at about 8% out during the peak, which is probably about double our normal, but I'll
So it's probably, so,
yeah. I'll see if that's declined. Should be declining.
all right, thank you.
Anybody else? Steve?
Do that. Yeah, and I think what I did understand was, a question about whether we had the right to put in stricter guidelines that were put out by the CDC, and the answer is yes. Given that what we did when we first opened up the schools, we said outdoor masks were required. That was never a CDC guidance. That was our guidance. The guidance we put out for coming back to school are actually following guidelines we've been given. So I don't think we're doing anything out of step or making things up on the fly. We're actually looking for experts to weigh in and tell us how to handle these issues as they crop up. So I would put that back as a response to the question that came up, even though we're not supposed to respond to questions necessarily, but that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Steve. And as you said, basically, we have done stricter guidelines, and those guidelines we were allowed to do as for the health and safety of our school community. It is in the education code for us to do so. We don't know anything about the San Diego case, so it would be great to get an email to understand your question a little bit more, but we can't do anything about it right now. So any more?
And we are, I'll just
Yeah.
verify, we are following
All the guidelines.
health or Santa Clara County Public Health guidelines.
Yes. Yep. Anybody, any more board members want to discuss this item? All right, no?
Wait, Jessica, I
I'm
have
sorry. Sorry. Yes, Sally.
sorry, and I guess the question could wait till the next item. It relates to overnight field trips. Since we're following Santa Clara County guidelines, when our kids go on field trips outside of Santa Clara County, are they supposed to follow our LASD COVID protocols or the local code?
They're following our LASD protocols.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right, any more discussion? All right, moving on to the next item, LASD COVID Safe Schools Plan Updates.
Yeah, as I mentioned just a moment ago, this is our updated Safe Schools plan with the identified updates included in it. Looking for approval of this.
All right. If any of the members of the public would like to comment on this agenda, please start raising your hand now. In the meantime, do you guys have any clarifying questions on the Safe Schools plan. I don't see any hands up in remotely or here. And I do not see any hands up for the public. And this is an action item. Any board discussion on this item? I do not see any board discussion. Can I have a motion to approve the LASD's COVID safe schools plan update?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Moving on to local control and accountability plan, mid-year update. Sandra.
All right, thank you. So this is a new requirement from the state this year that we need to provide a mid-year update to the board. This is really, I've separated it out into two parts. This is much more of a narrative storytelling, what's the progress we've made on our LPAP goals. On February 7th, I will come with the required templates completed that I've been working with Randy's office on that really focus on the budget and what have you. So tonight is our LPAP update. I bolded this little piece. I think it's really important. The LPAP is a funny beast. Part of it has requirements that we need to incorporate as part of our goals that are there year after year after year. And other pieces are really these local pieces of projects that we want to work on over time. So it's important to, as you see the different metrics as we go through, that some of these goals, our LCAP really is a 3 school year document. That part is important. So I tried to decide the best way to kind of, besides just talking at you the whole time, to give you a sense of the progress that we've been making. So I found these nice little measurements to be able to use and talk to a whole bunch of people as I kind of decided what's the right metric to add. When I come back in February, you'll get part of the pieces there are the official LCAP metrics that we look at, and you'll see those access to those that we have so far as a mid-year point. So our first piece, our first goal is around the conditions for learning portion of our LCAP. This is a required portion. And we always have number 1 and number 2. They're really a required part of the LPAP. We are so lucky in our school district that we are able to staff highly qualified teachers each year. Not every district can claim 100% each year, that we have well-maintained facilities, all those pieces. So our kids are stocked with good conditions for learning around number 1. Number 2, we're thrilled that this year, even with the pandemic, that all of our students are enrolled in a broad course of study, meaning they have access to their electives, all of those different pieces. You'll remember last year we had a slightly less broad course of study due to virtual school, but all of our students are enrolled this year. And then these next 2 really are more of ones that we wanted to make sure we were working on this year. So number 3, around equitable access to technology, we really scored that at 90%. All of our students have access to technology, but I know you all know that we're in the process of really understanding how the district can take on some financial responsibility for technology across schools to ensure that it is equitable moving forward. So that's why that one's not quite at 100%. All of our students have access to technology when we need it, but it does look a little bit different depending on class and school and grade across our district. So we're moving towards a more equitable outcome for kids in this area. And then number 4 is a huge project that we've been working on for several years that we are going to formally adopt NGSS, Next Gen Science Standards Aligned Science Curriculum. And this is really at 50%. This is an in-process item. We have a team of about, I don't know, 15 to 20 teachers across all of our schools, K-8, who are in the process right now. They're just wrapped up their first pilot of one published curriculum, and in March they start their second pilot of another published curriculum, and by June we'll be coming to you through the curriculum council and all of that official process. Will be coming to the board to recommend an adopted curriculum. So that's why that is at 50%. It's easier to stop and ask questions or just roll. We'll go. This second goal is really around tier 1 instruction, the instruction that all of our students receive in their classroom. And it's all around high quality first instruction. So we know, number one, the work around digital literacy. We have an established scope and sequence with linked curriculum that some of our teachers directly in the classroom teach. Our computer science teachers also teach an additional component to that. So we feel solid that that piece is at 100%. Number two there, you see we will adopt an anti-bias framework, train all stakeholders, and align lessons. You have kind of a 3-part goal there. As you know, last spring, you all adopted the anti-bias framework, so that piece is checked off. We have not yet trained all stakeholders, nor have we aligned lessons to teach to the framework. We have a small pilot group of teachers working on this right now, and we are kind of exploring what that looks like. We've trained this small group of teachers, but there's a lot of work to be done. This will definitely be through 2024 as we continue to expand that work beyond just a small pilot group. Number 3 there, we have our great instructional support teaching team who continue to support teachers around English language arts. And provide great PD around that, so we feel solid there. Our math plan, number 4, you know, last spring we adopted new math curriculum, so we certainly have a clear curriculum and assessment plan. We have absolutely trained teachers this year, but knowing that we're in year 1 of an adoption, our teachers are still learning. They're still working with our coaches. We had a lot of math sessions that were very well attended at our PD day last week. So this is work that we continue to do. So we see the improved math outcomes for kids. So that's in process, but we feel really great about the work that we've done this year. Number 5, of course, is at 0 because we have not yet adopted the curriculum. But that will really be something that we then begin next year once we have the curriculum adopted, hopefully this spring. And then number 6 is a huge undertaking. Every district is required to have an EL master plan. Our EL master plan is on the older side. So over this summer, I started, I'm about 1/3 of the way done. I presented it to DLAP, our District English Language Advisory Group, at our first meeting this year and got a lot of great feedback for the portion that I've completed. And we'll continue to kind of go in that cycle. I expect that this will probably be at least a 2-year. It really, the EL master plan is a document for the district that guides everything about our English learners, from how we initially identify them and test them, the type of program we provide, the curriculum that we use. It's a meaty beast, but important work, and we're excited about that work. This next, our goal 3 is really about that additional support that students above and below the line might need to improve outcomes. So when we look at goal number 1, about training all teachers in evidence-based intervention strategies, we have done tremendous work this year in the area of English language arts, specifically in reading, training all of our teachers. I know I've talked to you a little bit about the red binder that all of our teachers have. Each of our elementary teachers has a strong training now and resources to be able to support our students Next year, because we're focused on our new math adoption curriculum this year, next year we will start talking about math intervention, but this year we want them to get the core of our math program. So we've done that in pockets as needed, but really our big focus has been on literacy this year. Number two, this is an important piece that's included in our LPAP each year, that we will educate students in the least restrictive environment. This is real specific to our students with special needs who have IEPs. We want to make sure that they're in the classroom that best serves their needs with a limited amount of restrictions to it. So we feel great. As I was chatting, just to make sure my 100% was solid, one of our school psychologists was like, oh, our district does a tremendous job with this. So we should be proud of that work. Number three, again, we are so lucky to have our IST team to really help our teachers around these tier 2 and tier 3 supports. We have some tricky kids who, despite great efforts of our teachers and our solid curriculum and our interventions that are in place, we're so lucky to have a team of coaches who can really troubleshoot with teachers and try some new strategies and different things, and really be a partner with our teachers to best meet our student needs. Number four, we put at a 50%. This has been a new goal for us, and this was based on feedback from our DLAP last year around how do we better support long-term English learners. And a long-term English learner is identified as being in the United States for 6 or more years, but still not being reclassified as English fluent. So we're really talking about maybe our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students that might be right on the cusp if they were with us for TK. So we are, we've been doing a lot of research. We have kind of a framework of a plan in place. We are just in the process of doing some hiring to add some staff to be able to expand our program on the team. So this is exciting work. Our goal is to pilot something this spring and then figure out what needs to be tweaked so we can then expand that next year moving forward. Let's see, number 5, around really developing our tiered systems of support. This is probably one of our biggest collective successes and celebrations for this year. We've had pockets of great things happening at schools, and this year we have fully aligned our system. We're all using the same assessments. We're all using the same intervention curriculum. We have interventionists in place. We're looking at data. It's really very exciting. So we're real proud of that number 5 progress. Number 6, state and local data. Yep, data, we're using it. Much more so our benchmark. I think an area to grow is kind of the classroom level data and having teachers more readily looking at that. Data is so hard because it brings up a lot of feelings sometimes. It makes us ask a whole lot of questions. So it's definitely an area that we still have some growth to do. Really looking at and closely using that data. Number 7, our teachers and professional learning communities. You know, I would say that the pandemic has had an impact on our ability to do this really well. So that's why you're not seeing that at 100%. We've gone from in-person to virtual to many things on everybody's plate. So that is definitely an area I think everybody looks forward to the pandemic ending and being able to kind of get back to our routines around that, because we know it's a good professional practice. And then, as you know, we've been able to provide a really rich summer school experience for our students in the past, and we're already in the process of planning for our future summer. So we feel really great about those experiences and continue to improve year after year. And then lastly, goal 4 is around engagement, safety, and wellness for our students and for our staff. The first one, action under there, is around meaningful opportunities for parents. Again, I would say that the pandemic has really impacted Our principals are hustling, doing principal coffees virtually, inviting families in. We've been able to, I know, partner with LAF to have some speakers through the high school, but there's certainly a lot more we can do. We hired Lola as our family engagement person who's really reaching out to a community that we have not always been able to reach out meaningfully. So I know that that's an area for us to grow in the coming years. Number 2 there is all about teaching and modeling those really important critical skills for success in school. We have curriculum for our teachers to be able to use. Our school principals are ensuring that our school campuses are a safe and inclusive environment. And then lastly, we're really proud of all of our successes around mental health services. It's been a challenge to find personnel to staff the need, but I think we can say that our students and our staff have the access that they need to solid mental health supports this year. So I am so happy to answer questions about the good work that's been happening. And I'll remind you, this is in addition to the work I talked about last board meeting about all the things happening outside of our LPAP. Just a reminder.
Well, before we ask for clarifying questions, if any members of the public would like to provide public comment on this agenda item, please start raising your hand now. Anybody have any clarifying questions for Sandra?
I don't know whether I should ask it now or later.
Is it a question, a clarifying question or is it a
It's
discussion?
more discussion-ish.
Okay, then after later. Any clarifying questions? Steve or Shelley? All right, looks like no one from the public has any comments on this agenda item, so discussion. Vladimir.
You mentioned that we were putting together an GSS curriculum.
Yep.
And then you mentioned social studies in there. Is there a standard for social studies, or will there be a standard for social studies like the NGSS?
So there are standards for social studies. Every grade
Curriculum.
level has their own standards. We have curriculum. What we've been, the standards haven't changed for probably the last, I want to say 15 years or so. But they do have a new framework around how social studies is taught, and it's really around teaching through inquiry. So we are working to develop, curate inquiries that teachers can use along with the curriculum in their classrooms.
So going back on the NGSS, the curriculum standards. So the standards are obviously standards that tell you what you have to learn.
Yeah.
What about instructional methods themselves?
Yeah.
So there are two parts. There's the standards and there's how you teach the standards. How we do them on that.
It's the NGSS. When the standards came out, it was almost a really unique version in California because it included almost like a framework that typically tells you how we want it to be taught. They talk about the practices, the science practices, that really asking questions and all sorts of different things. So it is incorporated into the NGSS. It's beyond just content standards. It very much gets into how we want to teach science. Like now in NGSS, we always want to start with the idea of students experiencing or witnessing a phenomenon, like something that they see that they can ask questions. You know, one of the ones I did was an ice cube melting on a wooden block versus a metal block. And it's simply like an observation, and it asks students to generate some questions and some theories and some hypotheses. And then they do a little learning, and then they come back and like try to make some sense of things. So that it is definitely grounded in the pedagogy of how to teach science.
I can't refer to any page numbers there, but
Oh,
goal number 2, item number 2,
Yeah,
is that a 3-year goal there that we have?
well, this LPAP runs through the 23-24 school year.
Is that what goal 2, number 2, yeah.
Yeah,
That's,
the anti-bias
Yeah, yeah.
work. It will, we will see how long it takes. It will take us at least this long. You know, we've been learning a lot even already with our small pilot group of how to really best be teaching students around the standards within the framework.
because that's a particularly touchy one. too.
Yes.
Goal number 3, number 4.
Number 4.
Yeah. What about kids that come into our district from the outside? I can imagine that some of them would need sort of like a maximum booster shot to get from where they are, which could be from a totally different country that they don't speak English at all, to up to grade level. Do we have something that helps that?
So anytime a student joins our district, we learn first, are they coming from another country or have they been enrolled in a school in the United States? If they're coming from another country and they fill out a home language survey, it's complicated, but we do an initial assessment to understand to what degree are they proficient in English. Everybody who's a beginning student participates in our pull-out English program along with what the classroom teachers are doing. So that beginner works well. If a student is coming to us maybe from another school or another state, each year we're assessing, and we assess kids really right when they come to us to really understand what they need. And so far we've been able to meet those needs. The trickiest group for us in our district for some time has been our long-term ELs, that we have just a small, we don't have many of them, but we have a perpetual group who just don't reach proficiency, and we certainly don't want to send them off to high school, having had them since kindergarten and not have them be proficient in English. It's a problem.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice President.
any other discussion? Brian?
Yeah, just one comment about sort of the mental health aspects of this. Given the, and I know this was created before,
Yes.
but given the sort of crisis that we've seen, and especially given the positive feedback around the Back Together program that we heard a few months ago, I would kind of like to see us be a little bit more ambitious. I mean, the goal here says all students and staff will have access to mental health services. Ideally, I think we need to be a little bit more proactive than that and actually do activities, whether it's weekly, monthly, or what, to help our teachers and our school psychologists kind of get a check-in of how students are doing, because I know a lot of students are struggling and it's not always clear. Some of them present, but some of them don't necessarily. And so, you know, given that we know that there's a huge surge in mental health challenges, I'm happy to have a further conversation later on.
Yeah,
I would like to see us
absolutely.
be a little bit more proactive if we can.
I remember when Jennifer and Aaron were here doing their mental health update, they talked about this year in particular, we are collecting more data than we have in the past. You saw some of that data, but I think that's been an ongoing collection.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that frequently Jennifer will come and let us know that the need is greater than the supply right now. So we are adding hours or adding additional staff to make sure.
Right.
Yeah, I would love to.
Well,
chat
and the
see
hope is
what
that, you
your-
know, if you can catch it a little earlier, then maybe
Absolutely.
you can help kids without them getting to the point where they need, you know, professional therapy
Yeah.
resources that don't exist.
Yes.
Too many kids need them.
And beyond the Back Together art program, all of our schools have social and emotional curriculum, which is new for most of our schools this year. And that's really where that proactive piece comes in, where they're doing daily or weekly instruction.
Great.
In those pieces.
And or just in time instruction. as
Or
well,
just in
right?
time, yeah, depending on the need or and.
Steve,
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on what Brian was asking as well. I think one of the things that Sean and I were doing was trying to reach out and understand what was in place. And I think it would be good to bring the conversation we had with Jennifer and Aaron to the board at some point as a follow-up conversation about the structure that's in place. It was actually much more robust than we understood, which is great. The thing that where I thought was still a little gapped was staff support. I think there's to your point, access is there, but how do we on an ongoing basis support them? I think we support students really well, but there was a concern about staff access. Access did not equate to use, and what do we have in place to support them to make sure they can move forward and work on have a way to reach out on if it's minor, major, where to go. So further work I think is needed there would be my thought process. But your point, access, the way it was written, access is definitely there. It's more about, is it meaningful and do we have a better way of approach? Another way, do we need to look at another way to approach? We have, when we were at Santa Clara County, I know Brian saw this, I saw it, what's going on in Stanislaus County. We thought that was a county, it's something bigger than us. We'd have to tap into a larger organization to make it happen for teachers, but I thought it was actually something worth pursuing. So I would like to put that on the Jeff's action items to continue to nag about that one, because I think there was a real value in what they had put together there in providing support for both teachers and older students is where they found it actually, if you want to opt in. But just going to lay that out there as something to think about.
great. Thank you, Steve. Shally, do you have any comments? I don't have anything to add. I, as always, love to see your excitement over the Lpap.
You won't see me as excited next time. The template just doesn't do it for me.
The narrative is your sweet spot. Moving on to the 2022-23 state budget.
Yes, thank you. This will be a very high-level view of the governor's proposal for the state budget for next year. And I'm sure you're well aware, as I go to the first slide, that the state revenues are at an all-time high. The coffers have gotten significantly greater than were projected when the state budget was adopted back in June. And we unexpected strong recovery from the pandemic, at least so far. The total proposed fund spending for next year, about $286 billion for the state. And the revenues for K-14 and actually the state spending on K-14 is shown on the bottom of the slide up to $102 billion for next year. If we go to the next slide, it's kind of, I thought it was interesting to sort of look back at where we were last year. When actually January of 2021 is it's kind of a bluer color compared to the greenish color on the screen here. And what the state does is they have to rebench the Proposition 98 funding to schools every year. And so they go back, actually back to the 1920 year and rebench Prop 19, Prop 98. So you see the green bars represent what the Prop 98 funding should have been in each of those 3 prior years and what the governor is proposing for next year. So there's over a $16 billion additional amount of Prop 98 money between what was projected a year ago, what was actually in the state funding. We now have this excess from here to here available for spending this coming year. The governor's taking advantage of that. I also thought it was interesting to look back at my presentation last January to see what the governor's priorities were. And you can see them here on this slide. Some of them are, a lot of them carry over. They're just tweaked a little bit in how he's approaching this. So if we go to the slide for the current January, you'll see that he's addressing some of the same topics, maybe a little bit different way of treating them. Wanting to make sure that we are dealing with COVID-19, the pandemic. Kids are getting in-person instruction, dealing with the climate issues, dealing with the issue of homelessness. Note the vulnerability of our most needy citizens. That includes our most needy students, right? You know, that's a big thrust of what his state budget that he adopted for this year, and that goes forward in the next year as well. Dealing with inflation and building up the reserves at the state level so that we are not in a crisis mode should we have a recession in the near future. How does the proposals impact us? Not a lot that directly impacts us because of us being basic aid, the guarantee, the local control funding formula. There's $3.3 billion additional added to that. There's a COLA of over 5%, 5.33%. That's a big amount of money for a non-basic aid LCFF district. And you'll note here as a basic aid district, we get none of those funds because our company LCFF funding. That COLA of 5.33% was gets transferred to the charter school because their funding is based on the LCFF formula. We previously were estimating about a 2.5% COLA for next year based on prior projections. So when you look at what we're going to project next year now, with the 5.33% COLA, the funding transfer will go up about $250,000. Special ed funding, another area that we have a direct impact. They get the special ed gets the COLA, right? That alone should add about $150,000 in state funding for special ed. There is another chunk of money that the governor has proposed for special ed, $500 million in ongoing funding. And it's not 100% clear how that might impact us and districts, but some of it is going to actually go to increase the funding level for all districts. So it will enhance the 5.33% COLA, enhance the $150,000, but I don't know yet how much it's actually going to mean to us. It's going to change the funding a little bit and how it goes from the state down to us. So more on that when I get more information. Again, those are really the only direct impacts of this proposal on us, other than some special programs. So speaking of that, you'll recall there's a number of new programs, what we'll call categorical programs, new programs that are restricted, ones that come with restrictions in place. A lot of that was in the budget for this school year. And what he's proposing is to fund all those programs going forward with additional invested money. A lot of detail is not yet fleshed out. So as we get more information, we'll start bringing some of that to you in terms of the impact from this year's budget. You know, some of it from last year's budget or from, for example, the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program. Sanders talked to you about that already. And we'll get more information because things get tweaked a little bit this coming year. Again, I always have something about what's not included in the governor's budget. One of the big pluses I would say is do not add a lot of new programs. Like last year, a whole bevy of new programs. So investing the new money in the existing programs that he proposed in the current state budget. We're getting no relief on our costs for STIRS and PERS, and there's still no offer no liability coverage related to COVID for districts. I had a few comments from legislators that I included in the slides. I don't want to read them to you. You can read them at your leisure. One from Assembly Speaker Rendon. maybe to highlight the proposals that's the stage for continued careful implementation of last year's global budget initiatives. And then Senate President Atkins putting the wealth of the wealth of the wealthiest Californians or California's wealth to work for those who need it the most, right? The most vulnerable folks in our state. So that's pretty much it in terms of a very high level. The next board meeting, I'm going to do the preliminary budget, give you a quick overview of what it looks like on a multi-year projection for us. So that's here on the next steps. And then reminding you that in March, we'll have our second interim on the current year, second interim financial report update. May the governor revises his revenue proposals. The revenue revisions from the Department of Finance, he updates his proposals to reflect those revisions. And then we'll be adopting Lpap in the budget. We use may revise assumptions. With that, I'll turn it back to you.
Awesome. First thing, any members of the public would like to provide public comment on this agenda item, please start raising your hands now. Now for board questions, any clarifying questions? Yeah.
Couple of questions. One, in terms of universal meals, has there been any clarification from the state about sort of the details of what is an acceptable program and what's not? In terms of, like, I know the language sort of says you must supply 2 meals for any student who asks for it. But what wasn't immediately clear to me whether is like, can you ask families to sign up in advance for meals, or like, do you have to, any student who comes up to the window at 11:30, there's food for them to get?
Yeah. Good question. We're actually working with a consulting group right now on implementation details. I asked that question to the consultant today just to get clarification, because I've heard various opinions, but all the opinions have been saying is you don't have to sign up in advance. If somebody wants a lunch, they can just, or a breakfast, they can just ask for it then and there. No signups are required.
Right. Is there any prospect of, I mean, I know there's a hugely inadequate pool of money in theory for schools to help add to kitchen facilities, but I don't know if we're eligible for that or if we have any interest.
So I think we should be eligible for some of the infrastructure money that's out there. I mean, there is money. It's not clear yet whether you will get any. It's just a new proposal.
Right.
So I'm hoping to find that out. We're looking at all of our facilities right now this week and getting tomorrow to evaluate what we need to do in terms of any refurbishments and modifications, which I know there's going to be quite a few. And we were asking something.
When do you have a sense of when you might be able to have plans that you can share with us about next year?
Yeah, probably as early as the next board meeting, Brian. I think whatever, the next board meeting will be fine.
Great. As I was thinking through, it wasn't clear to me whether there are options where you're going to need our direction to sort of pick between
Okay.
various implementations. So we can have the conversation offline
Yeah.
about that.
Right now, what we're planning on doing is seeking meals from outside vendors, including other school districts. So instead of a Proctor Market or a Choice Lunch, we're not going to be able to provide what we need to other providers for our RFP process.
And then the last question I had was sort of to make sure I understand. As far as I know, there won't be additional money for the TK expansion for us. That's not in this, sort of just confirming my understanding that that's certainly not in the governor's proposal. And I've sort of heard from the grapevine that it's not looking great.
Right, that's not in the proposal. There is I want to remind everyone through our basic aid consortium across the state to put pressure on the legislature to keep the basic aid districts on forget.
Right. We should also get a slightly larger pie. Okay, thank you.
questions?
Just to
Yeah.
comment on that, I mean, what you said, Randy, stating the obvious, that what you described with the food.
Yeah.
Just sounds like a great deal of wasted food every day.
So I did want to comment on that. So a number of districts are doing the universal meals program this year. And what they have been telling me is, yeah, what they do is they start off producing more food than they think they need. And they say within a couple of weeks, they pretty much figure out, how much to make. So they have a little bit of extra, but not a ton of extra food. So it's, they kind of get a sense of how many kids are actually going to take meals, but there will be waste. And we're all trying to figure out. I mean, I was asking my neighbor district, they're saying, what are you doing about the excess food? I mean, they're going, we're trying to figure that out. So we'll be doing the same thing.
I'm sure schools will be devastated to know that pasta market is no longer providers.
And all of our PTA presidents are well aware of all this. We've been talking to them all about this. Yeah, for the parents and kids.
All right, any other questions? All right, and I didn't ask, nobody's raised their hand. Anything else to discuss on the budget? All right, on to City of Los Altos LASD School Subcommittee meeting.
Yes, place this on the agenda. As you know, there's a standing committee with the City of Los Altos, where we meet jointly to discuss items of mutual interest. We have not identified an exact date for that yet. We expect it will happen between the February 7th and March 7th board meetings, but wanted to bring this back to the board for comments and potential idea generation.
All right, first, if there's any member of the public that would like to type public comment, please raise your hand now. Any clarifying questions right now? Seeing no one raising their hand or discussion, would like to start? I'll go at once.
All right, I'll say a couple things. We have from our last meeting, we have a couple of items. And there's one that has been discussed. It should be part of, it should be etched in stone someplace. And that's the open to the gate at Egan, the back gate at Egan. It's still not there. We've moved forward on affordable housing. Have we got updates on developments? Stuff like that in the city? Yes. Yes.
Get them regularly.
Okay. As long as we sort of have a sense of safe routes to schools, do we have anything there?
I think it's friendly. We want to always talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, we have the updating right now going on of routes, as well as Sandra and I are in the throes of email conversations about curriculum for bike and pedestrian safety.
Great.
One question, has there been increased traffic on Covington after they put in the bumps on Weston?
There doesn't seem to be.
It might be helpful if you could just sort of ask principals if there are any traffic sort of hot issues that they would like us to raise with the city.
Other than that, those are the sort of standard items we have on the agenda each time.
So, Flannery, were there action items around the backdated Egan from the last meeting?
No, I don't think so. If I remember correctly, I just made a recommendation that we make sure to find out what the objections of the neighbors were before or during the discussion with the city council. That's all. I think the ones I've heard most often are it's going to be an area where kids can escape observation. Drop off traffic.
Was that an act, was Nixon taking it back for some discussion, or I have to look back.
I do know we got at least one message after it at board members. They upset that it was brought up by neighbors. But yes, we always need to have that until it's open. Until it's resolved.
Well, I think with respect to that issue,
Yeah.
I think if we want it to happen, we will have to do it.
Yeah.
So I think we're gonna have to decide as a board whether we're willing to really do it.
But
Or
they
not.
own that, they own the,
I understand
they
that.
own that property, so I
Right.
don't think it is as
But-
easy as you think it is.
I don't think it's easy at all, but I'm saying, as Vladimir said, right, this is a perpetual item.
Yeah.
So if we wait for the city council to move the
Yeah.
ball will never move.
Yeah.
So if we want it, we will have to do it.
So start a process to
So we will have
open it. No, I
Start a
agree.
process and a condemnation probably process
Yeah.
to do it. So
Yeah.
I don't know if there's consensus among us as to whether that's something we want or not.
We've needed this forever, so, but I think, would you like it to be open? Just curious.
Yeah. I think that, well, so I have some personal experience about drop-offs at Egan. There's a street there that.
Yeah, Portola is a disaster.
And it's really not a problem to have drop-offs on that particular street. And lots of people use it. It's over in 15 minutes. And as far as,
Which street are you talking about?
no, it's, I'm sorry, did I say Egan? I meant the high school.
Oh,
So there's. a street-
Valencia,
Yeah.
probably.
Jordan,
There's a bunch of different ones at
Jordan,
this point.
Jordan,
It's one of the streets.
the J.
Anyway.
Jordan.
Yeah,
So I'm not, personally, I don't think there's a huge issue with drop-offs on whatever street is the gate.
Yeah. Right.
And as far as not being visible, there are so many places in Los Altos you can go to be not visible. That I just don't think this is a big deal. It is something new, and people in general, yourself included, to go, oh, this is new, I don't know if I want it. But for us, it would be a big deal. I think I would be in favor of moving forward. Or at least telling the city that we really are going to move forward if they're not going to move forward.
And as it relates to the update on status of public housing, it's always pressing them to see that they're doing this in Menlo.
I'm wondering on that one in
Yeah.
particular, is there having to do the rewrite of the, is it of the
housing
housing
element,
element?
yeah.
Right through 2030, I
Yeah.
think it is.
Yeah.
Just wondering if there needs to be a voice in there of the schools, because the number of housing units that they're talking about adding, it's not insignificant, right? If they fall in line with the state expectations. I don't know
Yeah.
what that would be.
Yeah.
But
It would be good to get sort of a council to board perspective on how they're thinking about that. Are they thinking about adding it all in Alpena, or are they looking at?
The residential pipeline.
Right.
Is there a timeline for that report?
Yeah, the housing element has to be constructed over basically the next 12 months. There's a Los Altos, if you Google Los Altos housing element, there's a whole city website and a consultant they're working with. But basically what they have to do is they have to identify, so that from the state, they get a requirement for here's how many housing units is your portion of how many is needed. And there's obviously a big backlog in the state. So this cycle, I think this is the 5th cycle, it's 8-year chunks. So it's actually been going on for decades, this process. But this cycle, the levels that they're requiring from cities are, I think, literally an order of magnitude higher than the last cycle, because people are really pushing for extra housing. So for Los Altos, it's 2,000, 3,000, something like that, additional housing units. And the city's responsibility is to write a report that says, here is how our zoning will accommodate addition of that many units. And they have to get really specific, like this site is zoned for 200 apartments and this site is zoned for whatever. It's not the city's responsibility to build any of it.
Yeah.
But they have to prove to the satisfaction of the state agency that they're not just blowing smoke and claiming capacity that will never, be built for.
So from our point of view, then, we would like to know where can our input fit in? Or what kind of our input would fit in?
Yeah, I don't know, it'd be an interesting conversation to have. I'm not sure that there's a scope for us specifically, but I think it would be useful for us to understand, like, are they thinking about densifying neighborhoods, especially like some of the neighborhoods that are larger lots where theoretically you could subdivide and add new houses, or are they, is it all going to be on the El Camino corridor or maybe a little bit more corners or something, just for our planning purposes?
So housing elements should
Housing
be
element.
one of the agenda
Yeah,
items.
exactly.
An update from them on that, and perhaps as members that are in that meeting, you bring up perhaps representation from these school boards that feed in, be it LASD or MBLA. Oh,
I'd be comfortable with just knowing where we can
Yeah.
get input. as
yeah,
opposed to-
that too. I see,
If we have some.
yep. I see Steve has his hand up. Steve.
Yeah, it was more to piggyback on, I think, a conversation where you started to head there, Jessica. When we first put these committees in place, it was to deal with the ongoing conversation about Hillview and the possibility of Los Altos School District reasserting its claim over the space there, which obviously didn't work out. And then the ongoing conversation about how to transfer that thought process to other city parks, which also didn't really work out. To be honest with you, this committee really hasn't achieved much in terms of conversations since then. And my question is this make sense to maintain this committee moving forward, or does it make more sense kind of along the lines of what Brian or one of you brought up in the conversation is, do we need to actively insert ourselves into the city processes where these things are being discussed versus trying to get their attention independent of those processes? I noticed when we ended up in, when Mountain View adopted the precise plan for north of El Camino at the time, we were trying to influence the outcome of that with their consultant. And the best we got was, you have to think about it, got inserted into language, because we didn't get into the process until too late. And they look at their consultant reports as a way to drive this conversation. And so my question is, do we need to rethink the way we're trying to engage with the city to make sure that the outcome of this housing process that they're going through right now and other issues don't end up us kind of try to fix it after the fact? And I'd like to avoid that if we could. Traditionally, they've been more willing to meet with us, which is nice. But lately, scheduling these meetings hasn't really worked out. And frankly, the conversations haven't moved the needle much. So I'm asking, do we need to take a different approach in engaging with the city to get what we want out of it? Or is this committee still the way we want to go about it? Certainly, if we look at Los Altos Hills, we don't really have a conversation there anymore because there really hasn't been issues that have cropped up that they want to talk to us about. So I'm asking, are we in the same place? Mountain View doesn't want to have a direct conversation with us about stuff. So I'm asking, do we need to take a different thought or approach to how we deal with the city of Los Altos as well? Just something to float out there. If we're able to get a meeting on the boards and able to move that along, great. But I think there needs to be, we need to maybe rethink what we're doing with this committee, and is it providing what we want in the long term?
Yeah, of course.
So I mean, your point's a good one, Steve. I think with the San Antonio precise plan, what we got, I mean, I think Randy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the best we got in kind of that was a statement that the city would support creative partnerships between public and private entities, right? Whereas if we were, if we as a district were paying closer attention, we may have gotten our, we may have had the opportunity for input, or perhaps should have had it earlier than that. I think in what you described, it's going to fall on us to be paying closer attention to what's going on in the various government entities, right? And perhaps that becomes board committee appointment, or not even a committee appointment, but a charge of a trustee to be, paying attention to what's landing on agendas of cities, right? And actively, actively looking at those every other week.
And I think that's kind of what I was trying to argue for, was that we already have people assigned. Can we, Shally and I are supposed to be looking at the city of Mountain, or I think it's Shally and I are supposed to be looking at Mountain, Los Altos Hills. I haven't paid attention to their agendas. And the reality is I probably need to get in front of that. And I'm saying, rather than trying to wait for a meeting to get scheduled to have conversations, maybe that's the approach we need to take here to make that work moving forward. And Brian seemed to be on top of a lot of the topics the city's talking about, which is great. Do we need to be having ongoing conversations woven into our discussions about activity we would like to see both from us and from our community to provide feedback into those thought processes? Might be a more effective way of dealing with this than trying to create a meeting off script that may or may not feed into the committees that are established by the cities to take action.
Great. Shally? Shally's had her hand up.
I'm just wondering, because by the time we talk to city council, things are already pretty much moved along. Would it make, and I agree with you, Steve, by the way, about the cadence of these meetings and what we do or do not get accomplished. I was wondering, does it make more sense for us to develop a relationship with the city manager or the city staff? Because they're the ones who are actually doing something and doing all the research before they present it to city council. And I'm just thinking that might be a better place to insert ourselves. I'm asking this because tomorrow night is the Mountain View City Council meeting, and they're discussing their school resource officers. And they spoke to MVLA and Mountain View Wisman. But, as we all know, a little more than a quarter of our kids live in Mountain View, and one of our school sites is in Mountain View. And so why aren't we part of that conversation? And I think that it's city staff that does the research that gets presented to city council. So I'm just thinking, if there's another approach to take to this with our own city, Altos, maybe we should develop a relationship with the city manager or someone. Just a thought. I don't know.
That was going to be a suggestion I had too, Shally. It's a very good suggestion.
Thank you, Jessica.
But I think it's something, it's a hybrid. It's both. It is a board member being assigned to be on top of a city or two, following and making sure that the superintendent has a relationship with the different managers.
Right.
I nominate Brian to be on top of it.
And Steve, it's you and I that's Los Altos Hills.
That's what I remembered after I said it. Yeah.
Perhaps, so I think we have what we have, right?
Yes.
For this upcoming, but I'm wondering if that might be a separate item, agenda item discussion at a future meeting to really lay out how we might want to approach this moving forward.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's a sort of meeting practice that's ultimately up to the board president to, I think what Steve said makes sense. I could see sort of assigning people to stay on top of things and then having it basically be part of our weekly updates for them to,
Yeah.
either as a separate agenda item or just part of our general updates to make people aware of things that are going on in the cities. And then, we could take a crack at, and then beyond that, it makes a certain amount of sense to me to take other things like the Egan back gate or whatever else on sort of more of a case-by-case basis as a sort of ad hoc superintendent's committee, rather than, because I do think, especially this one, Steve, it makes a lot of sense that sort of things languish because it's kind of secondary for our board members who are involved, and it's kind of secondary for the council members who are involved. And so maybe if we switch it from being here's a meeting about all things Los Altos and LASD to here's some people who are running down specific topics, especially given that I mean, they're busy, we're busy, we're all
Yeah.
short-staffed, like, there's a million things we could theoretically talk about, but unless there's an actual drive to get things done, it probably doesn't make much sense to spend the time.
And I think the change in practice in the board is going to then need to be when there is an agenda item on on a partner city's agenda or some kind of inflection point that there's a process for taking action, right? Be it going speaking, be it submitting a letter, whatever it is.
Shelley?
So I just have a question since we're talking about the agenda for the upcoming Altos and LASD meeting. Why couldn't we just put this concern on the agenda? Ask the city, how do we work better with, how do we partner better? Because we don't want to find out when your agenda comes out that there's something on there that impacts us. Like, why couldn't we just put that and have a real discussion? Because, I'll be honest with you, when Vladimir and I met with the city last year, everybody's lovely, but it just felt like a smile and nod kind of meeting, as opposed to having a real dialogue back and forth and how we push this process forward. Just a thought.
Make it an agenda item. I
Yeah.
agree.
Put it on there.
Yes.
Can we go back to the discussion about Egan Gate? And I'm not sure if there was some kind of consensus or direction from the board, but there is that question that maybe we need to think twice before we make a decision here, and maybe talk through this in another meeting first.
Oh, for sure. With
Okay, I
no
wasn't
decision.
sure where
This
you
is direction to keep, we would like this to be brought up, and I think at another board meeting. And where we could have, it can be agendized so people can talk about it for sure. We're not going to be directing staff to make it happen.
Already, when you were asking us
We
to do-
definitely know the community, it's best that we get the community's comments on that matter, for sure. Thank you for pointing that out. Anything else? I think you feel like you've gotten enough direction. All right. Did I ask for?
You did.
I did, thank you. It was a long discussion and I don't remember. Moving on to board administration comments.
So I'll just point out that I see her here in attendance. Also this time prior has an education reporter, Jenna Pendleton. So I had a nice conversation with her today and look forward to her coverage of the district. And Sandra, I said to her, I'm going to connect you with her to learn a bit more about specific programs and get some depth around. So welcome, Jenna.
Sandra.
All right. So as Kate mentioned, we had a really great PD day last Tuesday. Lots of options for our elementary teachers and some specialized junior high sessions for our junior high folks, which was really great. I want to give a shout out to our CNI team because we had our full PD day planned and scheduled before we left in December for winter break. And then we came and decided it was time to switch to virtual. So there was a lot of reshuffling and a lot of retooling, but we were able to deliver for our teachers, which is great. Tomorrow.
Tremendous feedback.
And really great feedback from teachers. Yes, we always collect feedback. It was great. Tomorrow afternoon, I am attending a universal PK/TK training, the third of 3. So when you go back to Randy's, a couple of his slides with his list of programs from this year's budget, there's a lot of work for those programs that the governor has brought forth. So that TK is a big old chunk of work to really create a nice program for 4-year-olds within the school district. So that I'm learning more and more about that as we move along. And then wanted to let you know, next Tuesday, we have our second convening of our health and wellness, or our wellness committee. as we're looking at comprehensive sexuality education. And I'm looking forward to bringing you kind of an in-progress update in March at our March board meeting, because we will have had 3 of our wellness committee meetings. So it will be a nice time to update the board on what we've been up to. That's it for me.
Randy,
2 things. One, our Citizens Advisory Committee for Finance is meeting later this week, and they will be bringing a mid-year report to you. The second thing is, I think I might have talked a little bit about this before, but normally at this board meeting in January, we bring the audited financial report from the prior year to you. Normally, in normal years, that deadline for submitting it to the state is December 15. That got extended this year to the end of January because of the COVID pandemic. Just so you know, our auditors are still not done with their work. They've had a lot of absences due to COVID within their firm. I'm not sure they're going to even finish by January 31st, which means I will not have a report for you at the next board meeting in February. It looks like it'll be March 7th. And there are several audit firms in the same situation, and the state does YouTube. We were able to extend your just letting you know.
board, Vladimir. Steve. Charlie.
Oh, I just want to say I attended the last wellness committee meeting and I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to the next one. Went to challenge team last week. The County Office of Education had a governor's budget workshop with capital advisors. So I went there. So that was really interesting and disheartening. And this Wednesday, there's a Santa Clara County School Boards Association meeting that I will be attending. And that's it.
Brian.
I also listened in on the budget, but as Randy always says, given that we're basic aid, tons of it doesn't really apply to us, so it is what it is, but at least there's more money for education.
Yes. As for me, I attended the budget, the CSBA. I did make it to the county one, but I read the PowerPoint, which they sent. I helped at the vaccination clinic. Not only were there great volunteers, but they brought dogs, therapy dogs there, and they were needed.
They were.
We had young ones that really didn't want to get the shot.
Oh.
And so that was a fun part of it. And I also spoke to a We Will Know Truth last week. They wanted to know, what school board members do.
That should have been a short conversation.
I told them the most exciting thing I've done as a school board member was being on that train, because I love being on that train. My favorite thing for the
That's
festival of lights.
right.
And it was good for
Oh,
that.
yeah. That is awesome.
Well, it really spoke to the audience too. But that's all I got. Meeting is adjourned. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.